The silence in the corporate boardroom was deafening as Marcus Thompson carefully placed the vintage Rolex Submariner back on the mahogany table. The watch face gleamed under the fluorescent lights, its hands now moving with the precise rhythm that had been absent for months. Around the table, 12 executives stared at the custodial worker who had just accomplished what 3 certified horologists had deemed impossible. Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, picked up the timepiece with trembling fingers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The watch had belonged to her late father, the company's founder, and its sudden malfunction had felt like losing him all over again. She held it to her ear, listening to the steady tick that had been silent for so long. She whispered, her usual commanding presence reduced to simple amazement. Marcus straightened his shoulders, his janitor's uniform standing out starkly against the sea of designer suits surrounding him. His calloused hands still bearing traces of cleaning solutions, despite his careful washing, folded respectfully in front of him. Sometimes the old mechanisms just need someone who understands their language, ma'am. The morning had started like any other for Marcus Thompson. His alarm clock, a battered digital device that had seen better decades, buzzed to life at 4:30 a.m. in the cramped studio apartment he shared with his 8-year-old son, Jake. The early hour wasn't by choice but by necessity. His shift at Sterling Industries began at 5:30 a.m., giving him just enough time to prepare breakfast, get Jake ready for school, and navigate the city's public transportation system to reach the towering glass monument to corporate success, where he spent his days invisible among the marble and mahogany. Marcus moved through their morning routine with the quiet efficiency of someone who had perfected every motion through countless repetitions. In the tiny kitchenette, he prepared 2 bowls of oatmeal, adding a drizzle of honey to Jake's portion and leaving his own plain to stretch their grocery budget further. The coffee maker, a garage sale find that required precise timing to function properly, gurgled to life while Marcus laid out Jake's school clothes and checked his backpack for completed homework. "Morning, buddy," Marcus whispered as he gently shook Jake's shoulder. The boy stirred slowly, his dark hair tousled from sleep, brown eyes gradually focusing on his father's face. "Did you fix Mrs. Patterson's radio last night?" Jake asked, sitting up in the fold-out bed they shared. It was typical of his son to remember the small acts of kindness that filled their evenings, the way Marcus used his mechanical skills to help their elderly neighbor with whatever broken appliance or device needed attention. Got it working perfectly. She was so happy she cried a little. Marcus smiled, helping Jake navigate from sleepy confusion to full consciousness. "She said to tell you thank you for letting me borrow your tiny screwdriver set." Jake beamed with pride. At 8 years old, he had already begun to understand that his father possessed something special, a gift for understanding how things worked and making them function again. The boy had watched countless times as Marcus disassembled radios, toasters, alarm clocks and small appliances with the patience of someone who found genuine joy in the process of restoration. Their breakfast conversation followed familiar patterns. Jake shared his excitement about a science project due the following week, something involving simple machines and mechanical advantage. Marcus listened with the complete attention of a parent who understood that these moments of connection before the demands of school and work separated them were precious and irreplaceable. "What kind of simple machine are you thinking about?" Marcus asked, spreading peanut butter on toast with the care of someone who knew that making it last until payday required strategic thinking. "Maybe a pulley system, or something with gears." Jake's enthusiasm bubbled over as he described his ideas, his hands moving animatedly to illustrate concepts his 8-year-old vocabulary couldn't quite articulate. "I want to show how small forces can move big things when you use the right tools." Marcus felt a familiar surge of pride mixed with worry. Jake's curiosity and intelligence shone brightly, but quality educational resources cost money they didn't have. The public school did its best, but Marcus knew his son deserved opportunities that seemed perpetually out of reach. "We'll figure something out," Marcus promised, ruffling Jake's hair. "Maybe we can visit that surplus electronics store on Saturday. Sometimes they have interesting parts that could work for your project." The 40-minute commute to Sterling Industries required 2 bus transfers and a half-mile walk through the financial district. Marcus used the travel time productively, studying watch repair manuals he'd checked out from the public library. His fascination with timepieces had begun accidentally during his previous job at a jewelry store, where he'd been hired as security, but ended up helping the owner with simple repairs. The work had captivated him completely, the intricate mechanisms speaking a language he seemed intuitively to understand. When the jewelry store closed during the economic downturn 3 years ago, Marcus had lost both his job and his informal education in horology. The position at Sterling Industries paid less than his previous work, but it provided the health insurance Jake needed and the stability that single parenthood demanded. Still, he continued studying timepieces whenever possible, treating the knowledge like a secret hobby that might someday prove useful. Sterling Industries occupied 43 floors of gleaming steel and glass in the heart of the city's financial district. The building housed one of the most successful investment management firms on the East Coast, managing billions in assets for corporate clients and wealthy individuals. Marcus entered through the service entrance each morning, avoiding the marble lobby where clients and executives conducted business in a world that might as well have been on another planet. His supervisor, Carl Rodriguez, was already waiting with the day's assignments when Marcus arrived at the maintenance office in the building's basement. Carl had worked custodial services for 15 years, moving up from night shift to day supervisor through competence and reliability that earned respect from both his crew and building management. "Morning, Marcus. How's the boy?" Carl's greeting was warm but efficient. He genuinely cared about his team members' families while maintaining the professional focus their job demanded. "Growing too fast and getting too smart for his old man," Marcus replied, reviewing the list of offices, conference rooms, and common areas that needed attention. "Science project due next week. I think he's trying to build something that'll solve world hunger or achieve perpetual motion." Carl chuckled, remembering similar conversations about his own children when they were Jake's age. Kids that age think anything's possible. Sometimes that's exactly what the world needs. The morning routine began with vacuuming and dusting the executive offices on floors 38 through 43. Marcus had cleaned these spaces for 2 years, becoming familiar with the personal details that accumulated in any workplace. Family photographs on desks, prescription bottles discreetly tucked in drawers, the coffee preferences that revealed personality quirks, the personal items that humanized even the most intimidating corporate figures. Victoria Sterling's office occupied the corner of the 43rd floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city skyline. At 35, she had inherited Sterling Industries following her father's unexpected death from a heart attack 18 months earlier. The transition from grieving daughter to corporate leader had been brutal and public, with business media scrutinizing her every decision while competitors waited for signs of weakness. Marcus had observed her transformation during his months of cleaning her office. The framed family photographs had multiplied, as if surrounding herself with images of her father provided strength for the challenges she faced daily. Her desk, once organized with military precision, now showed signs of the overwhelming workload she carried. Coffee cups accumulated throughout the day, and she often fell asleep at her desk, waking to find a respectfully placed blanket that Marcus left during his evening cleaning rounds. This particular morning, Marcus noticed something different as he emptied Victoria's wastebasket. Nestled among the discarded papers was a small leather box, the kind used for jewelry storage. His curiosity piqued, he retrieved the box and opened it carefully, finding an elegant vintage watch that had clearly seen better days. The crystal was cracked, the metal case showed signs of wear, and the hands were frozen at 3:7. Marcus recognized the piece immediately from his study of horological history. It was a Rolex Submariner from the 1960s, a model that had become legendary among diving watch enthusiasts. Even in its current condition, the timepiece represented significant monetary value, but more importantly, it clearly held sentimental importance that made its abandonment in the trash peculiar and concerning. He set the box aside while completing his regular cleaning duties, but his mind kept returning to the watch. The movement would likely be an automatic caliber, probably a 1575 or similar mechanism known for reliability when properly maintained. The frozen hands suggested either mainspring failure or gear train obstruction, both potentially repairable issues for someone with appropriate knowledge and tools. As he prepared to leave Victoria's office, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of placing the watch box back in the wastebasket or leaving it on the desk where she might notice it, he slipped it into his cleaning cart. He told himself he would examine it more closely during his break, perhaps determine what exactly was wrong with the mechanism, and then return it with information about potential repair options. The maintenance office included a small workbench where Carl allowed the custodial staff to perform minor equipment repairs. Marcus spread a clean towel across the surface and carefully removed the watch from its leather box. Under the fluorescent lighting, the timepiece revealed both its age and its quality. The dial had developed a warm patina that collectors prized, and despite the surface wear, the underlying craftsmanship remained evident. Marcus removed his makeshift toolkit from his locker, a collection of precision instruments he'd assembled over years of tinkering with small appliances and electronics. Most were borrowed or improvised, but they served his purposes adequately for the delicate work he enjoyed. He selected a case-opening tool, essentially a modified knife blade that could fit into the narrow groove around the watch's case back. The case opened with surprising ease, revealing the movement within. Marcus caught his breath at the sight. The caliber 1575 movement was indeed present, its components arranged with the geometric precision that made mechanical watches seem like miniature cities populated by perfectly coordinated citizens. Some components showed oxidation from age and moisture exposure, but the fundamental structure appeared intact. Using a jeweler's loupe he'd purchased at a pawn shop, Marcus examined the gear train systematically. The problem became apparent quickly. The mainspring had lost tension over time, and accumulated debris was preventing proper engagement between several components. It wasn't catastrophic damage, merely the accumulated effects of years without proper servicing. Working with delicate precision, Marcus began disassembling the movement component by component. Each piece was placed in order on the towel, creating a map of the mechanism that would guide reassembly. He cleaned each part with solutions he'd learned to mix from his library research, removing years of accumulated dust and oxidation that had gradually strangled the movement's ability to function. The work was meditative, requiring complete focus that pushed aside worries about bills, Jake's education, and the uncertain future that single parenthood sometimes made overwhelming. In the world of springs, gears and escapements, problems had clear solutions. Patience and precision could restore function to even the most seemingly hopeless mechanisms. 2 hours passed unnoticed as Marcus worked through the cleaning and reassembly process. The mainspring regained its tension gradually as he wound it carefully, feeling the resistance that indicated proper engagement. Each component clicked into place with the satisfying precision of well-designed machinery returning to its intended function. When he finally closed the case and set the crown to running position, the second hand began its steady sweep around the dial. The watch was alive again, keeping time with the accuracy that had made Rolex legendary among precision instruments. Marcus held it to his ear, listening to the steady mechanical heartbeat that represented successful restoration. "Marcus, what the hell are you doing?" Carl's voice carried across the maintenance office, startled and concerned. The supervisor had returned from his rounds to find his employee hunched over what appeared to be expensive jewelry with an array of tools spread across the workbench. Marcus looked up, suddenly aware that he'd lost track of time completely. His cleaning cart sat abandoned beside the workbench, his assigned duties forgotten during his absorption in the repair work. Worse, he was holding a watch that didn't belong to him, having removed it from Victoria Sterling's office without permission. "I can explain," Marcus began, but the words sounded inadequate even to himself. How could he explain the impulse that had led him to take the watch? How could he justify spending work time on personal projects, even if those projects involved helping others?
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Carl approached the workbench, his expression shifting from anger to curiosity as he recognized the quality of the work Marcus had performed. The watch components were arranged with professional precision, and the restored timepiece was clearly functional again. "Is that a real Rolex?" Carl asked, his tone softening slightly. He'd never seen Marcus display this level of technical skill, despite knowing about his hobby of helping neighbors with broken appliances. "Vintage Submariner from the 1960s, Marcus confirmed. "I found it in Miss Sterling's trash. The movement was seized up, but it just needed cleaning and adjustment. Nothing was actually broken." Carl whistled low, recognizing both the value of the timepiece and the complexity of the work required to restore it. "You taught yourself to do this kind of repair?" "Library books, mostly. Some online videos when I can get internet access." Marcus began carefully packing his tools, aware that he needed to return the watch to Victoria's office before its absence was discovered. "I've been studying horology for about 4 years now. It started as just curiosity, but I find the work really satisfying." Carl's voice carried a note of serious concern. "You realize you could be fired for taking anything from an executive office, even if you were trying to help." The reality of his situation hit Marcus fully for the first time. In his enthusiasm for the repair challenge, he'd made a decision that could cost him his job. Without this position, he couldn't afford rent on their apartment or health insurance for Jake. The stability his son needed would disappear because of his impulsive desire to fix something that appeared broken. "I have to return it before anyone notices," Marcus said, placing the watch back in its leather box. Maybe she'll never know it was gone. But as he prepared to leave the maintenance office, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Victoria Sterling's voice carried clearly as she spoke with someone, their conversation heading directly toward the basement level where Marcus stood frozen with her father's watch in his hands. The door opened, and Victoria entered with Thomas Chen, her chief financial officer, both looking harried and intense. They stopped abruptly at the sight of Marcus and Carl standing beside the workbench, the atmosphere of the small space suddenly charged with tension. "I'm sorry to disturb you," Victoria began, her professional composure intact despite the obvious stress she carried. "I'm looking for something I may have accidentally thrown away this morning. A small leather box containing a watch. It belonged to my father." Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs as he faced the moment that would determine his future. He could lie, claiming he hadn't seen anything unusual, and hope she would eventually forget about the missing timepiece. He could confess to finding it, but claim he'd been unable to restore it, avoiding the complications that might arise from revealing his skills. Or he could tell the complete truth and accept whatever consequences followed. Jake's face flashed through his mind, along with all the conversations they'd had about doing the right thing even when it was difficult. His son deserved a father who demonstrated integrity through actions rather than just words. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said quietly, retrieving the leather box from his cleaning cart. "I found it in your wastebasket this morning. I hope you'll forgive me for taking it, but I thought there might be something I could do to help." Victoria accepted the box with shaking hands, her composure finally cracking as she held the one remaining connection to her father's memory. You found my father's watch in the trash. Yes, ma'am. I noticed it while emptying your wastebasket and thought it might be important to you. The mechanism wasn't working, so I took the liberty of examining it. Marcus gestured toward the workbench where his tools were still arranged. I hope I haven't overstepped, but I was able to restore it to working condition. Thomas Chen stepped forward, his expression skeptical. You're claiming you repaired a vintage Rolex. Do you have any idea what those watches cost or how complex their mechanisms are? Before Marcus could respond, Victoria opened the leather box and removed the watch. The steady tick-tick-tick filled the small maintenance office, and she held it to her ear with an expression of wonder mixed with disbelief. It's working, she whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I can hear it running. She examined the watch face, noting that the hands were moving with smooth precision. The time displayed was accurate to the minute, suggesting that the repair had been both skillful and thorough. After months of silence, her father's watch was alive again. How is this possible? She asked, looking directly at Marcus for the first time since entering the maintenance office. 3 certified watchmakers told me it was beyond repair. They said the movement was too damaged by age and neglect to ever function properly again. Marcus chose his words carefully, aware that anything he said would either vindicate or condemn his actions. Sometimes old mechanisms just need someone who approaches them with patience rather than replacement in mind. The movement wasn't actually damaged, just neglected. All the components were still functional, they just needed careful cleaning and adjustment. Victoria studied Marcus with new interest, seeing him as an individual for the first time rather than simply part of the building's maintenance staff. He was younger than she'd initially assumed, probably in his early 30s, with intelligent eyes and hands that showed evidence of careful, precise work. His custodial uniform was clean and pressed, suggesting pride in his appearance despite the humble nature of his employment. You said you examined the mechanism, she continued. What exactly did you find wrong with it? Marcus relaxed slightly as the conversation moved into technical territory, where his knowledge was solid. The mainspring had lost tension over time, which is normal for automatic movements that haven't been worn regularly. Additionally, accumulated dust and debris were interfering with the gear train, preventing proper power transmission from the mainspring to the escapement. Thomas Chen frowned, clearly skeptical about a janitor's ability to diagnose complex mechanical problems. And you have training in watch repair. Certification from a horological school. No formal training, Marcus admitted. I've been studying independently for several years, mostly through library books and observation. I worked briefly at a jewelry store where I learned basic techniques, but everything beyond that has been self-taught. Victoria held up her hand, stopping Thomas's next question. I don't care about his credentials, I care about results. She strapped the watch to her wrist, feeling the familiar weight that had been absent for so long. My father wore this every day for 30 years. When it stopped working, I felt like I'd lost the last connection to him. 3 professionals told me it couldn't be saved, so I finally gave up and threw it away. Her voice strengthened as she continued. This morning I regretted that decision, but I thought it was too late. Now you're telling me it just needed someone who understood how to listen to what it was trying to say. Marcus nodded, understanding the emotional significance of the restoration beyond its technical aspects. Old watches are like people in some ways. They need attention and care, but they're usually stronger than they appear. Most problems that seem catastrophic are actually just accumulated neglect that can be addressed with patience. Carl had remained silent throughout the exchange, but now he spoke up with obvious pride in his employee. Marcus helps a lot of people in our building with broken appliances and electronics. I've seen him fix things that other people would throw away without thinking twice. What kind of things? Victoria asked, her interest clearly genuine rather than polite. Coffee makers, radios, small televisions, anything with mechanical or electronic components, Marcus replied. My neighbors know I enjoy the challenge, so they bring me their problems. Most of the time the solutions are simpler than people expect. Victoria exchanged a meaningful look with Thomas Chen, some form of silent communication passing between them. As CEO, she was constantly surrounded by people who claimed expertise they didn't possess, consultants who promised solutions they couldn't deliver, and advisors who told her what they thought she wanted to hear, rather than what she needed to know. Marcus represented something different. He had demonstrated practical competence without fanfare or self-promotion. He had restored something precious to her when professionals had declared it hopeless. Most importantly, he had done so without expecting recognition or reward, driven apparently by simple desire to solve a problem he encountered. "Marcus," she said finally, her voice carrying the authority that had made her successful in corporate leadership. "I have a proposition for you. How would you like to see our corporate headquarters? Not the public areas or the executive floors you clean, but the parts of our business you've never had reason to visit." Marcus felt confusion and concern in equal measure. Was this some form of elaborate termination process? Was she leading him toward a conversation with security about theft of company property, even though he had restored and returned the watch voluntarily? "I'm not sure I understand, ma'am. Sterling Industries manages investment portfolios for clients who own valuable collections, art, rare books, vintage automobiles, and yes, antique timepieces." Victoria's explanation began to suggest possibilities that Marcus hadn't considered. "We maintain relationships with specialists in various fields who help us assess and maintain these assets. What I'm proposing is that you meet some of these people and see whether your skills might be valuable in a professional context." Thomas Chen stepped forward, clearly concerned about the direction of the conversation. "Victoria, I understand your gratitude, but we have established procedures for evaluating potential consultants. Professional references, formal credentials, insurance coverage, all the protections that prevent liability issues. And look where those procedures led with my father's watch," she replied sharply. 3 certified professionals, all highly recommended, all completely wrong about what was possible. The tension between them suggested this was an ongoing disagreement about management philosophy, rather than a discussion specifically about Marcus.
Victoria had apparently been pushing for more flexible approaches to problem solving, while Thomas represented the cautious corporate structure that prioritized predictability over innovation. Marcus sensed that he was caught in the middle of a larger conflict within Sterling Industries leadership. Whatever Victoria was proposing would likely face resistance from other executives who valued conventional credentialing over demonstrated ability. He needed to navigate the situation carefully to avoid causing problems for either of them. "I appreciate your confidence in my abilities," he said diplomatically, "but Mr. Chen raises valid concerns. I'm not formally trained or certified in any professional capacity. I'm just someone who enjoys fixing things and has been fortunate enough to develop some skill through practice." "Exactly," Victoria said with satisfaction. "You approach problems without preconceptions about what's supposed to be impossible. That perspective is rare and valuable, especially in business contexts where conventional wisdom often prevents creative solutions." She turned to Thomas with the expression of someone who had made a decision and would not be dissuaded. "I want him to meet Rebecca Martinez in our collectibles assessment division. She works with specialists who evaluate vintage items for our clients, including timepieces. Let her make the professional judgment about whether his skills have commercial value." Thomas sighed, recognizing defeat in an argument he'd apparently had many times before. "I'll arrange a meeting, but I want it clearly understood that this is exploratory only. No commitments, no promises, just an informal consultation to assess potential value." Victoria smiled, the first genuine expression of joy Marcus had seen from her since entering the maintenance office. "Perfect. Marcus, would you be available tomorrow afternoon around 2 o'clock? I know it's during your regular work schedule, but I think this conversation could be interesting for everyone involved."
Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet as possibilities he'd never imagined began to take shape. Meeting with assessment specialists could lead to consulting opportunities, additional income, maybe even a career change that would provide Jake with better opportunities. At the same time, the risks were significant. If the meeting went poorly, if his skills were deemed inadequate for professional use, he could find himself unemployed and blacklisted from future opportunities. "Yes, ma'am," he said finally. "I'd be very interested in that meeting." Victoria extended her hand, offering a handshake that felt like a formal acknowledgement of partnership rather than merely polite closure. "Thank you, Marcus. For the watch, for the reminder that sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected sources, and for agreeing to explore what might be possible." As she and Thomas Chen left the maintenance office, their footsteps fading down the corridor, Marcus remained standing beside the workbench where everything had changed. Carl placed a supportive hand on his shoulder, both men aware that a single morning had transformed not just a broken timepiece, but potentially an entire life trajectory. "You realize what just happened?" Carl asked quietly. Marcus nodded slowly, still processing the implications. "I think the CEO of Sterling Industries just offered me a chance to turn my hobby into something more professional." "More than that," Carl replied with a grin. "You just proved that sometimes the most valuable skills are the ones people develop because they love the work, not because someone told them they had to learn it." The rest of Marcus's shift passed in a blur of routine cleaning tasks performed with hands that still trembled slightly from nervous excitement. His mind raced through possibilities and concerns in equal measure. Tomorrow's meeting could change everything for him and Jake, but it could also expose him as inadequately prepared for professional responsibility. The gap between fixing neighbors' appliances and serving corporate clients was vast, filled with technical knowledge, business protocols, and professional standards he'd never encountered. That evening, as Marcus helped Jake with homework at their small kitchen table, he struggled with whether to mention the day's extraordinary events. His son deserved to know that opportunities might be developing, but raising hopes that could be crushed seemed unfair to an 8-year-old who trusted his father to make wise decisions. "Dad, you're distracted tonight," Jake observed with the perceptive directness that children sometimes display. "Did something happen at work?" Marcus considered his response carefully. Jake had learned to read his moods accurately, making deception both difficult and inappropriate. At the same time, adult concerns about employment and financial security weren't burdens that belonged on a child's shoulders. "I had an interesting conversation with some people at the office," Marcus said finally. "They might be interested in my watch repair skills for some projects they're working on. It's still very preliminary, but it could lead to some additional opportunities." Jake's face lit up with excitement and pride. "Like fixing more watches for people? That would be amazing. You're so good at making broken things work again." The simple confidence in his son's voice both encouraged and terrified Marcus. Jake's faith in his abilities was absolute, unburdened by the self-doubt that came with understanding how much he still didn't know about professional horology. Tomorrow's meeting would test whether that faith was justified or merely the loving bias of a child who saw his father as capable of anything. "We'll see what develops," Marcus said, ruffling Jake's hair affectionately. "Right now, let's focus on your science project. Have you decided what kind of simple machine you want to build?" As they discussed pulleys and lever systems, Marcus found himself thinking about the mechanisms that governed human opportunity, just as precisely as gears and springs controlled timepieces. Sometimes a small adjustment in the right place could restore function to systems that appeared permanently broken. Sometimes patience and careful attention could reveal possibilities that others had deemed impossible. Tomorrow would determine whether his own life was about to be restored to working condition, or whether today had been merely a brief moment of hope in a reality unchanged by good intentions and wishful thinking. Either way, he would face the meeting with the same systematic patience that had brought Victoria Sterling's watch back to life, trusting that careful attention to detail could overcome the disadvantages of his informal education and unconventional background.
The vintage submariner on Victoria's wrist would continue marking time with restored precision, a small miracle of mechanical resurrection that had opened doors Marcus never knew existed. Whether he could walk through those doors successfully remained to be determined, but for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that change was not only possible, but perhaps even probable. The 37th floor of Sterling Industries felt like entering another dimension. Marcus had spent 2 years cleaning the executive levels, but he had never ventured into the specialized departments that occupied the middle floors of the building. The collectibles assessment division existed in a world of climate-controlled storage rooms, specialized lighting systems and security measures that rivaled museum installations. Rebecca Martinez greeted Marcus at the elevator with the warm professionalism of someone accustomed to working with diverse specialists. At 42, she had built her career evaluating rare objects for insurance companies, estate settlements and private collectors. Her department served as the bridge between Sterling Industries' investment management services and the tangible assets that comprised significant portions of their clients' portfolios. "Mr. Thompson, welcome to our little corner of organized obsession," Rebecca said with a genuine smile that immediately put Marcus at ease. "Victoria told me about your work on her father's watch. I'm curious to see what you think of our current challenges." She led him through a series of connected rooms that resembled a combination laboratory and treasure vault. Display cases contained items ranging from Ming Dynasty ceramics to vintage automobiles, each piece representing millions of dollars in client assets. The timepiece section occupied an entire room, with dozens of watches arranged in climate-controlled cases under specialized lighting that revealed every detail of their construction and condition. "This is impressive," Marcus said, genuinely awed by the scope of the collection. "How do you manage authentication and condition assessment for so many different categories?" "Very carefully, and with a network of specialists who sometimes disagree dramatically about the same piece," Rebecca replied with a laugh that suggested hard-won experience with expert opinions. "That's actually why Victoria wanted you to meet me. We're dealing with several timepieces that have proven problematic for conventional approaches." She stopped in front of a display case containing 3 watches, each bearing tags that indicated ongoing assessment challenges. The first was an early Patek Philippe perpetual calendar, its complications frozen in a configuration that suggested mechanical failure. The second was a vintage Omega Speedmaster with a movement that had been declared unrepairable by 2 different specialists. The third was a Vacheron Constantin dress watch whose provenance had been questioned due to unusual manufacturing details. "These represent different aspects of the same fundamental problem," Rebecca explained. "Expert opinion based on theoretical knowledge sometimes conflicts with practical reality. We need people who can look beyond conventional wisdom and see what's actually happening with the mechanisms." Marcus studied the 3 timepieces with growing fascination. Each presented unique challenges that would require different approaches and techniques. The Patek Philippe's perpetual calendar was among the most complex mechanical movements ever created, with hundreds of components working in precise coordination to track dates, moon phases, and leap years automatically. The Omega Speedmaster was a legendary chronograph that had been worn during space missions, making its condition assessment critical for accurate valuation. The Vacheron Constantin represented the intersection of mechanical excellence and artistic achievement, where authenticity questions could affect value by millions of dollars. "What specific issues are the experts encountering?" Marcus asked, his analytical mind already beginning to formulate approaches to the problems. Rebecca opened the case containing the Patek Philippe and carefully removed the watch, placing it on a padded examination tray. The perpetual calendar mechanism appears to be stuck in a transition state. 2 specialists have declared it mechanically damaged beyond repair, citing the complexity of the movement and the difficulty of sourcing replacement components. A third expert disagrees, claiming the problem is adjustment rather than damage, but he's unable to demonstrate a solution. Marcus examined the watch case, noting the subtle indicators that revealed information about its internal condition. The crown position suggested the mechanism was engaged in date change mode, which typically occurred automatically during specific hours of the night. If the movement had stopped during this transition, the delicate gears controlling the calendar functions might be locked in an intermediate position. Has anyone attempted to advance the time manually through the transition period? Marcus asked, recognizing a potential solution that specialists focused on movement disassembly might have overlooked. The experts were concerned about forcing the mechanism and causing additional damage. Rebecca replied, Patek Philippe movements are notoriously delicate, and replacement parts are virtually impossible to obtain for vintage pieces. Marcus nodded, understanding the caution that had paralyzed the assessment process. Expensive timepieces attracted conservative approaches that prioritized avoiding damage over achieving function. However, mechanical systems were designed to operate, and sometimes gentle encouragement could restore normal operation without invasive intervention. Would it be possible for me to examine this piece more closely? I'd like to understand exactly what's happening with the calendar mechanism before suggesting any intervention. Rebecca hesitated momentarily, clearly weighing the risks of allowing an uncredentialed technician to handle a watch worth more than most people's houses. However, Victoria's confidence in Marcus had been convincing, and the current impasse wasn't serving anyone's interests. Our insurance requires that valuable pieces be examined only in controlled conditions with appropriate supervision, she said finally. But I can arrange for you to work in our technical assessment room with our senior appraiser observing. Would that be acceptable? The technical assessment room resembled a surgical suite designed for mechanical rather than medical procedures. Multiple magnification systems, precision lighting, and specialized tools created an environment where the smallest details could be examined and documented. Dr. Alan Foster, the senior appraiser, was already waiting when they entered. His gray hair and careful movements suggested decades of experience with delicate restoration work.
Dr. Foster, this is Marcus Thompson, the gentleman Victoria mentioned. Rebecca made the introductions with diplomatic care. Marcus, Dr. Foster oversees all of our technical assessments and has 40 years of experience in horological restoration. Foster studied Marcus with the measured evaluation of someone accustomed to judging competence quickly and accurately. His handshake was firm but brief, and his questions were direct rather than conversational. I understand you restored Victoria's Submariner without formal training. That's either remarkable intuition or dangerous luck. Which do you think it was? Marcus appreciated the directness of the question, recognizing it as a professional assessment rather than personal challenge. Probably some of both, sir. I had studied the movement type extensively, but practical application always involves variables that theory can't predict completely. I was fortunate that the problems were within my current skill level. And what do you think of our Patek Philippe situation? Marcus moved closer to the examination table, where the perpetual calendar lay under bright lighting. Using the provided magnification equipment, he studied the dial configuration and crown position carefully before responding. The calendar mechanism appears to be caught in mid-transition, probably between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. when the automatic date change occurs. The gears controlling the perpetual calendar are designed to engage gradually during this period, but if the mainspring lost power during the process, they could be locked in an intermediate position. Dr. Foster nodded approvingly. That's consistent with my assessment. The question is whether manual advancement through the transition is safe, or whether internal damage has made the mechanism too fragile for normal operation. Only one way to find out, Marcus replied, but the approach would need to be systematic, small incremental advances with careful monitoring for resistance or binding. If the mechanism responds normally to gentle encouragement, it suggests the gears are aligned properly and just need power to complete their cycle. The next hour passed with intense concentration as Marcus worked through the delicate process of manually advancing the Patek Philippe through its frozen calendar transition. Dr. Foster observed every movement, occasionally offering suggestions or asking questions about Marcus's reasoning. Rebecca documented the process with photographs and detailed notes that would become part of the watch's permanent assessment file. The breakthrough came when Marcus felt the subtle change in resistance that indicated the calendar mechanism had completed its interrupted cycle. The date display advanced smoothly to the correct position, the moon phase indicator aligned properly, and the perpetual calendar resumed its normal operation. The watch was not only functional but keeping accurate time with the precision that had made Patek Philippe legendary among collectors. "Remarkable," Dr. Foster said quietly, his professional reserve giving way to genuine admiration. The previous experts were so focused on potential internal damage that they never tested whether the mechanism simply needed to complete its normal cycle. Marcus carefully returned the watch to its display position, aware that he had just successfully restored a timepiece worth more than his annual salary. The implications of the success extended beyond the immediate problem. He had demonstrated practical problem-solving skills that complemented formal training, suggesting value in approaches that combined theoretical knowledge with hands-on experimentation. "The Omega presents different challenges," Rebecca said, moving to the second problematic timepiece. "The chronograph function has been declared unrepairable due to worn components that supposedly can't be replaced. However, the base movement continues running normally, which suggests the problem might be more specific than general mechanical failure." The Speedmaster's history was legendary among watch enthusiasts. NASA had selected it as the official timepiece for space missions after extensive testing, and examples that had actually been worn in space commanded astronomical prices from collectors. This particular example showed signs of heavy use but retained the original dial and hands that authenticated its vintage provenance. Marcus studied the chronograph pushers and subdials, noting the symptoms that had led to the repair diagnosis. The chronograph seconds hand moved erratically when activated, and the timing functions failed to reset properly when the reset pusher was pressed. These symptoms typically indicated problems with the chronograph mechanism's linkage system rather than fundamental movement damage. "Has anyone attempted to isolate the specific components causing the chronograph malfunction?" Marcus asked, already formulating a diagnostic approach. "Two specialists have examined it," Dr. Foster replied. "Both concluded that the chronograph module requires complete rebuilding with components that are no longer available from Omega. The estimated repair cost exceeded the watch's auction value, making restoration economically impractical." Marcus nodded, understanding how economic considerations often prevented restoration of timepieces that were mechanically salvageable. However, if the problem was more limited than the experts had concluded, a targeted repair might be both feasible and cost-effective. The examination process revealed that the chronograph's primary issue was accumulated debris in the reset mechanism rather than worn components requiring replacement. Years of use had deposited microscopic particles in the delicate linkages that controlled the chronograph functions. These particles were preventing smooth operation but could be removed through careful cleaning without component replacement. Dr. Foster watched with growing interest as Marcus disassembled the chronograph module with systematic precision. Each component was cleaned individually using techniques that combined traditional approaches with improvised solutions for problems the original designers hadn't anticipated. The reassembly process required exact timing and careful adjustment to ensure all functions operated properly. When Marcus finally tested the restored chronograph, all functions performed flawlessly. The timing accuracy matched factory specifications, and the reset mechanism functioned with the crisp precision that characterized properly maintained Omega movements. Another supposedly impossible restoration had been accomplished through patient analysis and methodical problem-solving. "I'm beginning to understand Victoria's enthusiasm," Dr. Foster said, as he examined the fully functional Speedmaster. "Your approach combines technical knowledge with practical problem-solving in ways that formal training sometimes discourages." The third timepiece, the Vacheron Constantin, presented authentication challenges rather than mechanical problems. The watch functioned perfectly, but several details of its construction had raised questions about its originality among experts evaluating it for insurance purposes. The dial showed aging patterns that some specialists considered inconsistent with the watch's supposed age, while others argued that the variations were within normal parameters for authentic pieces. Authentication disputes can be more contentious than restoration challenges, Rebecca explained. Financial stakes are enormous, and expert reputations depend on accurate assessments. When specialists disagree, resolution often requires additional evidence that standard evaluation methods can't provide. Marcus studied the disputed timepiece under high magnification, examining the details that had generated controversy. The dial's aging pattern showed variations in color and texture that could indicate either authentic patina development or artificial aging techniques used by skilled counterfeiters. The movement components appeared consistent with Vacheron Constantin manufacturing practices from the appropriate period, but several details suggested manufacturing variations that were either rare authentic examples or sophisticated reproductions. What specific evidence would resolve the authentication questions? Marcus asked, recognizing that his mechanical skills might be less relevant to questions of originality and provenance. Ideally, documentation of manufacturing details that counterfeiters wouldn't know to reproduce. Dr. Foster replied. Vacheron Constantin maintained detailed records of production techniques, including minor variations in component finishing that changed over time. If we could identify specific manufacturing signatures that match documented practices from the appropriate period, it would strongly support authenticity. Marcus continued examining the movement components, noting subtle details of their construction and finishing. His self-taught knowledge of horological history included information about manufacturing techniques that had been abandoned as production methods evolved. Some of these techniques left traces that were difficult to reproduce convincingly without access to original equipment and methods. The balance wheel shows tool marks that are consistent with hand-finishing techniques Vacheron Constantin used during the 1950s but discontinued when they modernized their production methods. Marcus observed, the pattern of file marks and polishing scratches matches examples I've seen in restoration manuals that documented original manufacturing processes. Dr. Foster moved closer to examine the details Marcus had identified, using higher magnification to confirm the observations. The tool marks were indeed consistent with hand-finishing techniques that required specific tools and skills that modern counterfeiters were unlikely to possess. These are exactly the kind of manufacturing signatures that support authenticity, Dr. Foster confirmed. The counterfeiters who are skilled enough to reproduce Vacheron Constantin movements typically use modern techniques that don't leave these specific traces. This evidence should be sufficient to resolve the authentication questions. Rebecca made detailed notes about the manufacturing evidence that Marcus had identified, recognizing that his contribution had provided the breakthrough needed to complete the assessment. The three problematic timepieces that had challenged conventional approaches were now resolved through methods that combined theoretical knowledge with practical problem-solving skills. Marcus, I think we need to discuss a more formal arrangement, Rebecca said as they concluded the technical assessments. Your approach to these problems demonstrates skills that would be valuable on a regular basis. Would you be interested in consulting work with our department? The offer represented the opportunity Marcus had hoped for but hadn't dared to expect. Consulting work would provide additional income while allowing him to maintain his custodial position until a more stable arrangement could be developed. More importantly, it would give him professional experience that could lead to career advancement based on demonstrated competence rather than formal credentials. I'm very interested, but I want to be transparent about my limitations, Marcus replied carefully. My knowledge is self-taught and focused primarily on mechanical movements. I don't have experience with some of the business aspects of assessment work, and my availability is constrained by my regular employment schedule. Those constraints are manageable, Rebecca assured him. Most of our consulting work can be scheduled around your availability, and we have administrative staff who handle the business aspects of client relationships. What we need is someone who can solve technical problems that conventional approaches can't address. Dr. Foster nodded in agreement,
The industry has become too dependent on credentialing and not sufficiently focused on results. You've demonstrated practical competence that complements formal training effectively. I'd recommend starting with specific project assignments that allow you to develop familiarity with our procedures while contributing your technical skills. The conversation moved to practical details of consulting arrangements, compensation structures, and scheduling logistics. Marcus learned that Sterling Industries maintained relationships with dozens of specialists who provided expertise in various fields related to collectible assets. The arrangement would formalize his role while providing flexibility that accommodated his primary employment and family responsibilities. "There's one more person you should meet before we finalize anything," Rebecca said as their meeting concluded. Victoria mentioned that she wanted to discuss the broader implications of our collaboration. "She's waiting in her office when you're ready." The elevator ride to the 43rd floor gave Marcus time to process the magnitude of the changes occurring in his life. In less than 48 hours, he had gone from invisible custodial worker to valued technical consultant. The transformation was both exhilarating and terrifying, representing possibilities he had dreamed about but never expected to achieve. Victoria's office felt different now that Marcus was visiting as a potential business partner, rather than the anonymous cleaner who had tidied her workspace for 2 years. She gestured to chairs arranged around a small conference table, creating a more collaborative atmosphere than the formal desk setting typically used for employee meetings. "Rebecca tells me you've had a productive afternoon," Victoria began, her tone carrying the satisfaction of someone whose judgment had been vindicated.
3 problems that stumped conventional experts, resolved through approaches they hadn't considered. I was fortunate that the problems aligned with my particular areas of knowledge, Marcus replied modestly. Different timepieces would have presented challenges I couldn't address. That's exactly the point, Victoria said, leaning forward with the intensity that had made her successful in corporate leadership. Every specialist has areas of strength and limitation. The key is recognizing when problems require different approaches and being willing to try unconventional solutions. She opened a folder containing documents that appeared to be client assessment reports and financial analyses. Sterling Industries manages collectible assets worth over $2 billion. Our clients depend on accurate assessments for insurance purposes, estate planning, and investment decisions. When conventional approaches fail, we need alternative methods that can provide reliable results. Marcus studied the financial figures with growing awareness of the stakes involved in assessment work. Individual timepieces often represented millions of dollars in value, and authentication errors could result in enormous financial losses for clients who trusted Sterling Industries' expertise. Your work this afternoon prevented 3 pieces from being written off as losses, Victoria continued. The Patek Philippe alone was valued at $4 million before its mechanical problems made it seemingly worthless. Rebecca tells me you restored full functionality in less than 2 hours. The numbers were staggering to someone accustomed to living paycheck to paycheck. Marcus's morning salary was less than the hourly appreciation on some of the timepieces he had examined. The disparity highlighted both the opportunity presented by consulting work and the pressure that came with handling assets worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. I want to propose an arrangement that goes beyond occasional consulting, Victoria said, presenting documents that outlined a formal business relationship. Sterling Industries would like to retain your services as a technical specialist with specific focus on mechanical timepieces and related precision instruments. The proposal included a retainer fee that exceeded Marcus's annual custodial salary, plus additional compensation for specific project work. More significantly, it offered professional development opportunities, including advanced training, access to specialized tools and equipment, and mentorship from established experts in the field. "This is incredibly generous," Marcus said, scanning the contract terms with amazement, "but I have to ask why you're willing to invest so heavily in someone with my limited background." Victoria smiled, the expression carrying both business calculation and personal warmth. because results matter more than credentials, and because I believe in identifying talent wherever it emerges. You've demonstrated practical competence that took formal experts years to develop. That represents value that transcends conventional qualification requirements." She paused, her tone becoming more personal. "Also because I recognize something in your situation that resonates with my own experience. When I inherited this company, everyone assumed I was unqualified because I hadn't followed traditional paths to executive leadership. I succeeded by focusing on results rather than trying to prove I belonged in roles others thought I hadn't earned." The parallel between their situations wasn't exact, but Marcus understood the underlying theme. Both had found themselves in positions where conventional expectations didn't apply, requiring them to prove competence through performance rather than credentials. Victoria's success had apparently taught her to recognize similar potential in others facing comparable challenges. "There's one condition I need to discuss," Marcus said carefully. "I have an 8-year-old son whose needs have to be my first priority. Any arrangement we make has to accommodate my responsibilities as a single parent." "Absolutely," Victoria replied without hesitation. "The consulting arrangement is designed to provide flexibility that supports rather than conflicts with your family obligations. Most assessment work can be scheduled around your availability, and emergency situations are rare in collectibles evaluation." She opened another folder containing what appeared to be educational program information. "Sterling Industries also maintains a scholarship fund for employees' children. Jake would be eligible for academic support programs, tutoring services, and eventually college funding if our arrangement continues successfully." The offer addressed Marcus's deepest concern about his son's future opportunities. Jake's intellectual curiosity and academic potential deserved support that Marcus's current financial situation couldn't provide. Educational scholarships could transform his son's prospects in ways that would justify any risks associated with career change. Additionally, Victoria continued, "We're planning to expand our technical assessment capabilities to include other categories of precision instruments, vintage cameras, scientific equipment, clockwork mechanisms, and similar items that require mechanical expertise for proper evaluation. Your skills could be applicable to multiple areas that would increase both the variety and compensation of consulting work." Marcus felt the familiar sensation of mechanisms clicking into place, but this time the alignment involved his own life rather than the timepieces he repaired. The opportunity Victoria was offering addressed multiple concerns simultaneously, while opening possibilities he hadn't imagined. Professional recognition, financial security, educational opportunities for Jake, and the chance to build expertise in fields that genuinely fascinated him. "I accept your proposal," Marcus said, extending his hand to formalize the agreement. "When would you like me to start?" "Immediately," Victoria replied with satisfaction. "Rebecca has identified several additional pieces that could benefit from your approach, and we have client meetings scheduled next week where your assessments would be valuable." She gathered the contract documents and handed them to Marcus for review and signature. "Take these home tonight and look them over carefully. If you have questions or concerns, we can address them tomorrow. But I wanted you to know that Sterling Industries is committed to making this arrangement successful for everyone involved." As Marcus prepared to leave Victoria's office, she called his attention to a small display case near the windows. Inside was her father's Rolex Submariner, the watch that had started the entire transformation of his circumstances. "I wanted to show you something," she said, moving to stand beside the display. "My father wore this watch every day for 30 years, but I never really understood what it represented until you restored it. It's not just a timepiece, it's a symbol of precision, reliability and enduring value that survives when other things fail." She paused, looking directly at Marcus with an expression that conveyed both professional respect and personal gratitude. "You gave me back more than a functioning watch. You restored my connection to my father's values and reminded me that the most important repairs often involve things people thought were broken beyond fixing. The elevator ride to the basement level felt like descending from one world into another. Marcus returned to the custodial office where Carl was completing paperwork for the day's maintenance activities. The familiar environment now seemed strange after the afternoon spent in climate-controlled assessment rooms handling million-dollar timepieces. "How did your meeting go?" Carl asked, noting the folder of documents Marcus carried. "Better than I expected," Marcus replied, still processing the magnitude of the changes ahead. "They've offered me consulting work that could eventually become a full-time career change. It's an incredible opportunity, but also a significant risk." Carl studied his employee with the mixture of pride and concern that characterized his management style. He had recognized Marcus's potential long before anyone else, but he also understood the challenges that came with major career transitions, especially for single parents with limited financial resources. "What kind of timeline are we talking about?" Carl asked practically. "And what does it mean for your position here?" "They want to start immediately with part-time consulting while I maintain my regular job," Marcus explained. "If things develop successfully, we could discuss transitioning to full-time specialized work, but that would probably be months down the road." "That sounds like a reasonable approach," Carl agreed. "Gives you time to develop the new skills while maintaining income security. And it means I don't lose one of my best workers until we're sure the new arrangement will be stable." The conversation reminded Marcus that career changes affected more than just individual circumstances. Carl had invested time and training in developing a reliable employee, and the custodial department would need to find and train a replacement if Marcus eventually moved to full-time consulting work. Professional courtesy required managing the transition in ways that minimized disruption for everyone involved. "I want to handle this properly," Marcus assured him. "Sterling Industries understands that I have commitments here, and they're willing to work around my existing schedule. If things eventually develop to the point where full-time consulting becomes viable, we'll have time to plan the transition appropriately." Carl nodded approvingly. "That's the right approach. Take advantage of the opportunity, but don't burn bridges unnecessarily. You've got good instincts about people and situations. Trust them to guide you through whatever comes next." The bus ride home gave Marcus time to review the contract documents Victoria had provided. The financial terms were more generous than he had expected, but the professional obligations were correspondingly substantial. Sterling Industries would be investing significantly in his development, creating expectations for results that went beyond the informal help he provided to neighbors with broken appliances. Jake was waiting at the kitchen table when Marcus arrived home, homework spread across the surface in the organized chaos that characterized his son's study habits. The boy looked up expectantly, clearly hoping for news about the mysterious work meeting his father had mentioned. "How did your meeting go, Dad?" Jake asked, his 8-year-old directness cutting through any attempt at evasion. Marcus sat down across from his son, choosing his words carefully. Jake deserved honesty about the changes that might affect their lives, but adult concerns about financial security and professional responsibility weren't appropriate burdens for a child to carry. "Very well," Marcus replied. "The people I met were impressed with my watch repair skills, and they've asked me to help with some special projects. It could lead to additional work opportunities that would provide better financial security for us." Jake's face lit up with excitement and pride. "Does that mean you'll get to fix more important watches, like the really expensive ones they show in museums?" "Something like that," Marcus confirmed with a smile. "The watches I worked on today were worth more money than most people make in several years." It was both exciting and nerve-wracking to handle something so valuable. "But you didn't break anything, right?" Jake's concern was immediate and practical. "Because you're really careful with delicate things." "Everything went perfectly," Marcus assured him.
In fact, I was able to fix problems that other experts thought were impossible to solve. That's why they want to continue working with me." Jake beamed with satisfaction, his faith in his father's abilities completely vindicated. "I knew you were the best at fixing things. Does this mean we might not have to worry about money so much anymore?" The question struck at Marcus's deepest concerns about their financial security. Jake had learned to recognize the signs of economic stress even when Marcus tried to shield him from adult worries.
8 years old, was too young to understand concepts like career advancement and professional development, but it wasn't too young to hope for stability and security. "It means we have new opportunities that could improve our situation significantly," Marcus said carefully. "But it also means I'll be learning new skills and taking on responsibilities I haven't had before. We'll need to be patient while things develop." They spent the evening working on Jake's science project, which had evolved into a complex pulley system that demonstrated mechanical advantage principles. Marcus found himself explaining gear ratios and torque multiplication with the same systematic approach he had used in the afternoon's timepiece assessments. The parallel wasn't lost on either of them. "Dad, do you think understanding how machines work might help me get a good job someday?" Jake asked as they fine-tuned the pulley arrangement. "Understanding how things work is always valuable," Marcus replied. "But the most important thing is finding work that challenges you intellectually and allows you to help other people solve problems. Whether that involves machines or something completely different doesn't matter as much as finding something you enjoy doing well." Jake nodded thoughtfully, his 8-year-old mind processing concepts about career satisfaction and professional purpose that would shape his future decisions. The conversation reminded Marcus that parenting involved modeling values and approaches to life that extended far beyond immediate circumstances. That night, after Jake had fallen asleep, Marcus spread the consulting contract across the kitchen table and studied it carefully. The legal language was complex, but the underlying terms were straightforward. Sterling Industries was offering him professional recognition and financial compensation in exchange for technical expertise and problem-solving skills he had developed through years of self-directed learning. The risks were significant. Consulting work involved responsibilities and expectations that extended beyond his current experience. Client relationships required professional communication skills he had never developed. Technical assessments carried financial implications that could result in substantial losses if his judgments proved incorrect. At the same time, the opportunity represented everything he had hoped for when he began studying horology 4 years earlier. Professional recognition for skills he had developed out of genuine interest rather than economic necessity. Financial compensation that would provide security for Jake's future. Most importantly, the chance to build expertise in fields that fascinated him while contributing meaningfully to other people's important decisions. Marcus signed the contract with the steady hand that had restored Victoria Sterling's father's watch to life. The mechanical precision that guided his repair work would now govern his professional development, with careful attention to detail and systematic problem-solving approaches that had proven successful in both timepiece restoration and single parenthood. The next morning brought the familiar routine of early breakfast and school preparation, but with an undercurrent of anticipation that made everything feel different. Marcus moved through the same motions he had performed thousands of times, but with awareness that this might be among the last mornings when custodial work represented his primary identity and source of income. Jake sensed the change immediately, commenting as they walked to the bus stop that his father seemed more relaxed and confident than he had in months. The 8-year-old's perception confirmed what Marcus felt but hadn't articulated. The weight of financial uncertainty and professional limitation had been pressing on him gradually for years, becoming so familiar that he had stopped noticing the burden until it began to lift. "Today feels different," Jake observed as they waited for the school bus. "Like something good is starting." Marcus squeezed his son's hand affectionately, grateful for the child's intuitive understanding of emotional currents that adults often missed. "I think you're right. We've been working toward this for a long time without really knowing what we were working toward. The bus arrived with its usual chaos of children and backpacks and morning energy. As Jake climbed aboard and found his seat, he pressed his face against the window and waved goodbye with the enthusiasm that characterized all his interactions with the world. Marcus waved back, feeling a surge of determination to justify his son's confidence and build the secure future Jake deserved. The commute to Sterling Industries felt different as well, transformed from routine transportation to the beginning of professional development that would extend far beyond his current understanding. Marcus used the travel time to review technical information about timepiece categories he would be working with, preparing for assessments that would test skills he had been developing without realizing their commercial value. At Sterling Industries, his morning custodial duties proceeded with the same efficiency he had always maintained, but with new awareness that these tasks represented transition rather than permanent employment. The executives whose offices he cleaned were no longer distant figures whose work remained mysterious. Victoria Sterling had become a business partner whose investment in his development created both opportunity and obligation. Rebecca Martinez was waiting when Marcus finished his regular duties, ready to begin the practical aspects of consulting work that would determine whether the previous day's success could be replicated consistently. She had prepared additional timepieces that required assessment, each presenting different technical challenges that would test various aspects of his developing expertise. Today we'll focus on diagnostic skills, Rebecca explained as they entered the technical assessment room. Client work often begins with determining whether problems are economically repairable before investing in detailed restoration efforts. Learning to make those judgments accurately is crucial for commercial success. The skills Marcus had developed through informal study and neighborhood repairs were about to be tested in professional contexts where accuracy and efficiency determined both client satisfaction and business profitability. The transition from hobby to career had officially begun, with all the excitement and uncertainty that major life changes inevitably entailed. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the conference room on the 40th floor, facing a table of executives from Rolex Corporation's North American division. The pristine white walls displayed certificates and awards that Sterling Industries had accumulated over decades of successful asset management. Today's meeting would determine whether Marcus's unconventional path from custodial worker to horological specialist had prepared him for the ultimate professional recognition. Sarah Chen, Rolex's Vice President of Heritage and Authentication, studied the detailed report Marcus had prepared about a disputed vintage Daytona. The timepiece, purportedly owned by a famous racing driver from the 1970s, had generated authentication controversies that threatened a $50 million estate settlement. 3 established experts had offered conflicting opinions, leaving the legal proceedings deadlocked. Mr. Thompson, your analysis contradicts assessments from 2 certified Rolex specialists, Sarah said, her tone professional but challenging. You're claiming this Daytona is authentic despite manufacturing details they consider inconsistent with period production. Marcus remained composed, drawing on months of experience handling high-stakes assessments for Sterling Industries' most demanding clients. His reputation had grown steadily as word spread through collector networks about his ability to solve authentication puzzles that stumped conventional approaches. The specialists focused on dial printing variations that do appear unusual for standard production pieces, Marcus replied calmly. However, my research into Rolex's experimental manufacturing processes from 1971 revealed that a limited number of Daytonas were produced with modified dial specifications for racing team sponsors. The printing variations they identified actually support authenticity rather than contradicting it. He activated the presentation system, displaying high-resolution photographs that documented microscopic details of the disputed timepiece. Additionally, the movement components showed tool marks and finishing patterns that matched documented Rolex production techniques from the specific time period. These manufacturing signatures would be virtually impossible for counterfeiters to reproduce accurately. Victoria Sterling observed the exchange from her position at the head of the table, her investment in Marcus's development about to be validated or questioned by some of the most respected figures in luxury watch authentication. The past 6 months had transformed him from uncertain custodial worker to confident specialist whose opinions influenced million-dollar decisions. Dr. Foster, who had become Marcus's mentor in advanced assessment techniques, nodded approvingly as the presentation continued. The systematic documentation and logical reasoning demonstrated professional competence that rivaled formally trained specialists, while the unconventional research approaches had uncovered evidence that established experts had missed. The key breakthrough came from examining Rolex's archive materials about custom pieces produced for racing sponsors. Marcus continued. Standard authentication protocols don't account for these experimental variations because so few examples survived. However, the manufacturing records confirm that dial modifications were implemented for specific racing teams during 1971 and 1972. Thomas Rodriguez, Rolex's Director of Technical Authentication, leaned forward with obvious interest. The evidence Marcus had assembled challenged conventional wisdom about vintage Daytona production, but the documentation appeared thorough and convincing. "You're suggesting that our own authentication specialists overlooked historical production records?" Thomas asked, his tone more curious than defensive. "Not overlooked, but perhaps didn't have access to the specific archive materials I located," Marcus replied diplomatically. "My research approach benefits from not being constrained by established authentication protocols. I examine pieces without preconceptions about what should or shouldn't exist." Sarah Chen studied the archive documentation Marcus had provided, cross-referencing the information with Rolex's internal historical records. The evidence supported his conclusions about experimental dial variations, while the technical analysis demonstrated expertise that transcended formal training limitations. "Mr. Thompson, where exactly did you acquire this depth of knowledge about Rolex production history?" Sarah asked, her professional curiosity evident. "Independent research combined with practical experience examining hundreds of vintage timepieces over the past 6 months," Marcus answered honestly. "Sterling Industries provided access to extensive collections that allowed me to study manufacturing variations across different periods and models. Pattern recognition developed through hands-on examination rather than theoretical study." The honesty about his unconventional background could have undermined his credibility, but the quality of results spoke more convincingly than any credentials. The disputed Daytona authentication had implications extending far beyond the immediate estate settlement, potentially affecting valuations of similar pieces throughout the collector market. Victoria recognized the pivotal moment in Marcus's professional development. Rolex Corporation's acknowledgement would establish his reputation definitively, opening opportunities that formal training alone couldn't provide. The investment Sterling Industries had made in his development was about to yield returns that exceeded even her optimistic projections. "Dr. Chen, based on the evidence Mr. Thompson has presented, what is Rolex's position regarding this timepiece's authenticity?" Victoria asked, steering the conversation toward resolution. Sarah Chen conferred quietly with Thomas Rodriguez before responding. "The archive documentation provides compelling evidence that supports authenticity. Combined with the technical analysis of manufacturing signatures, we're prepared to issue formal authentication confirming this as a genuine 1971 Rolex Daytona with experimental dial specifications produced for racing team sponsorship." The authentication resolved a dispute that had consumed months of legal proceedings while establishing Marcus's credibility with the most authoritative source in luxury watch evaluation. However, Sarah Chen's next statement exceeded everyone's expectations. "Mr. Thompson, Rolex Corporation would like to discuss a formal consulting arrangement with you.
Your research capabilities and analytical approach represent exactly the kind of specialized expertise we need for complex authentication challenges. The offer hung in the conference room air like a perfectly balanced timepiece mechanism, each component of meaning clicking into place with precise timing. Marcus had achieved recognition from the ultimate authority in luxury watchmaking, validation that transcended every limitation his unconventional background had seemed to impose. "I'm honored by your confidence," Marcus replied, maintaining professional composure despite the magnitude of the opportunity. "However, I should mention that my primary commitment remains with Sterling Industries, who have invested significantly in my professional development." Victoria smiled with satisfaction, recognizing Marcus's loyalty while appreciating the leverage his success provided. "Perhaps we could discuss an arrangement that benefits everyone involved. Sterling Industries would be pleased to facilitate Rolex's access to Marcus's expertise while maintaining our collaborative relationship." The negotiation that followed established Marcus as an independent specialist with consulting agreements that provided both security and flexibility. Rolex Corporation would retain his services for complex authentication projects, while Sterling Industries maintained priority access for their client assessments. The arrangement offered financial compensation that exceeded his most optimistic expectations while providing professional recognition that validated years of self-directed learning. As the meeting concluded, Thomas Rodriguez approached Marcus with obvious respect. "Your background is unusual, but your results speak definitively. The watch industry needs people who combine technical knowledge with fresh perspectives on old problems." Sarah Chen nodded in agreement. "We've been looking for specialists who can think beyond established protocols while maintaining accuracy standards. Your work today demonstrates exactly what we hoped to find." The elevator ride to the ground floor gave Marcus time to process the transformation his life had undergone. 6 months earlier, he had been invisible among Sterling Industries' custodial staff, unknown and unrecognized despite skills that were already developing. Today he held consulting contracts with 2 of the most prestigious organizations in luxury asset management.
Jake was waiting in the lobby with Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor who had volunteered to bring him to the office for this special occasion. The 8-year-old's face lit up when he saw his father emerge from the elevator, anticipation evident in every gesture. "Dad, how did it go? Did the important watch people like your presentation?" Jake asked, bouncing with excitement that drew smiles from the formally dressed executives nearby. "They liked it very much," Marcus replied, kneeling to his son's eye level. "In fact, they offered me a job working with them on special projects. It means we'll have even better financial security, and you'll have more opportunities for the education you deserve." Jake hugged his father with the fierce affection that had sustained them through years of uncertainty and struggle. "I knew you were the best at fixing watches. Does this mean you won't have to clean offices anymore?" "It means I'll have choices I didn't have before," Marcus replied carefully. "I can continue custodial work if I want the security, or transition completely to watch specialist work, if the opportunities develop as expected." Victoria approached them with a warmth that transcended professional relationships. Over the past months, she had become not just Marcus's business partner, but a genuine friend who shared his commitment to Jake's well-being and future prospects. "Jake, your father just received job offers from some of the most important people in the watch business," Victoria told the boy. "You should be very proud of what he's accomplished." "I'm always proud of my dad," Jake replied with 8-year-old directness. "But I'm happy other people finally noticed how amazing he is at understanding how things work." The simple statement captured the essence of Marcus's journey from invisible worker to recognized specialist. Jake had never doubted his father's capabilities, even when financial pressures and professional limitations had made success seem impossible. The child's unwavering confidence had provided emotional foundation that sustained Marcus through months of uncertainty and self-doubt. Carl Rodriguez arrived to join the celebration, having requested time away from his supervisory duties to witness Marcus's professional triumph. His investment in Marcus's development had begun long before anyone else recognized potential that transcended custodial responsibilities. "Marcus, I couldn't be prouder if you were my own son," Carl said, his emotion evident despite his typically reserved demeanor. "You've proven that talent and determination matter more than conventional credentials or established pathways." The group moved to a nearby restaurant where Marcus had reserved a table for the celebration dinner that would mark the end of one phase of his life and the beginning of another. The conversation ranged from technical discussions of horological assessment to Jake's science fair projects to Victoria's plans for expanding Sterling Industries' specialized services. "Marcus, there's something else I wanted to discuss," Victoria said as dessert arrived. "Sterling Industries is planning to establish a formal training program for specialists in precision instrument assessment. We'd like you to develop the curriculum and oversee the initial implementations." The proposal offered an opportunity to share the knowledge Marcus had accumulated while creating pathways for others facing similar challenges with unconventional backgrounds. Teaching would complement consulting work while contributing to industry development in ways that extended his influence beyond individual assessments. The program would focus on practical problem-solving approaches rather than theoretical frameworks, Victoria continued. Students would learn diagnostic techniques, historical research methods, and client communication skills that prepare them for real-world consulting situations. Marcus recognized the significance of the opportunity extending far beyond personal career advancement. The training program could democratize access to specialized knowledge while raising industry standards through systematic education that combined formal instruction with hands-on experience. "I'm very interested in developing such a program," Marcus replied. "There are probably many people with mechanical aptitude and curiosity who never get opportunities to apply their skills professionally. A structured pathway could identify and develop talent that conventional approaches miss." Jake listened to the adult conversation with the intense focus he applied to subjects that captured his interest. At 8 years old, he was beginning to understand concepts about career development and professional opportunity that would shape his own future decisions. "Dad, when I grow up, could I work with watches too?" Jake asked, his curiosity sparked by months of observing his father's developing expertise. "You could work with anything that interests you and challenges your mind," Marcus replied. "The most important thing is finding something you enjoy doing well, whether that involves watches or completely different fields. Maybe I'll invent new kinds of precision instruments that haven't been created yet." Jake mused, his 8-year-old imagination already working through possibilities that adults might dismiss as impractical. Victoria laughed with delight at the boy's ambitious thinking. "With your curiosity and your father's guidance, I wouldn't be surprised if you accomplish exactly that." The evening concluded with plans for Marcus's transition to full-time specialist work, educational arrangements that would support Jake's academic development, and program development timelines for the training initiative that would extend Marcus's influence throughout the precision instrument assessment industry. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Less than a year earlier, he had been struggling to provide basic security for himself and Jake while nursing private dreams about professional recognition that seemed impossibly distant. Tonight he held consulting contracts with prestigious organizations while planning educational programs that would create opportunities for others facing similar challenges. The transformation hadn't occurred through luck or circumstance, but through systematic development of skills combined with willingness to take calculated risks when opportunities emerged. Marcus's success validated the principle that talent and determination could overcome conventional limitations when supported by people who recognized potential rather than focusing on credentials. Jake fell asleep during the taxi ride home, exhausted by excitement and celebration that had extended well past his usual bedtime. Marcus carried his son upstairs to their apartment, which would soon be replaced by better housing that consulting income could support. The small space had sheltered them through years of uncertainty, but now represented transition rather than permanent circumstances. The next morning brought the familiar routine of school preparation, but with an undercurrent of anticipation about changes ahead. Jake's enthusiasm about his father's success infected their breakfast conversation, while Marcus planned the practical details of career transition that would improve their lives substantially. "Dad, Mrs. Patterson wants to know if you'll still fix her radio when it breaks again," Jake reported, demonstrating his 8-year-old understanding of neighborhood relationships that had sustained them through difficult periods. "Of course I will," Marcus assured him. "Success doesn't change the importance of helping people when we can. If anything, we'll have more resources available for community assistance." The conversation reinforced values that had guided Marcus through every stage of his journey from custodial worker to recognized specialist. Professional achievement represented opportunity to contribute more effectively rather than escape from previous circumstances or relationships. At Sterling Industries, Marcus's final day of custodial duties proceeded with ceremonial significance that acknowledged the transformation his life had undergone. Colleagues who had worked alongside him for 2 years expressed pride in his success while joking about knowing a famous watch expert before he became famous. Rebecca Martinez had prepared an office space where Marcus would work as senior technical specialist, complete with advanced equipment and reference materials that would support the consulting projects ahead. The professional environment represented recognition of his evolved status while providing tools that would enhance his developing capabilities. "Marcus, there's one more surprise," Rebecca said as they toured the new workspace. "Rolex Corporation has arranged for you to attend their Advanced Authentication Seminar in Switzerland next month. It's a program typically reserved for certified specialists, but they've made an exception based on your demonstrated competence. The opportunity to study at Rolex headquarters would provide access to historical archives and technical resources that few specialists ever experienced. More importantly, it represented ultimate validation from the most authoritative source in luxury watchmaking." Victoria appeared in the doorway with documents that finalized Marcus's transition to full-time specialist work. "I wanted to personally deliver your new employment contract and welcome you officially to your expanded role at Sterling Industries." The contract terms reflected both the value Sterling Industries placed on Marcus's expertise and the competitive market for specialized talent that his success had revealed. Financial compensation would support educational opportunities for Jake while providing security that had been absent throughout their previous struggles. "Victoria, I can't adequately express my gratitude for the investment you've made in my development," Marcus said, reviewing the contract with amazement at how dramatically his circumstances had changed. "The investment has generated returns that exceed my most optimistic projections," Victoria replied with satisfaction. "Your success demonstrates the value of recognizing talent wherever it emerges and providing opportunities for people to apply their capabilities professionally." As Marcus signed the documents that formalized his transformation from custodial worker to senior specialist, Jake arrived at the office for an after-school visit that had become routine during recent weeks. The boy's presence reminded everyone that professional success was most meaningful when it created better opportunities for the people we care about most. "Dad, are you ready to be a famous watch expert now?" Jake asked with the directness that consistently cut through adult complexities. "I'm ready to continue learning and helping people solve problems," Marcus replied, maintaining the humility that had guided him through every stage of his development. "Fame is less important than doing work that matters." The evening celebration included dinner at an upscale restaurant where Marcus had never imagined dining, followed by a visit to a luxury watch boutique where Jake could examine timepieces that represented the pinnacle of horological achievement. The boy's questions demonstrated curiosity and analytical thinking that suggested he might indeed follow his father into precision instrument fields. "These watches are beautiful, but they're so expensive," Jake observed,
studying a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar similar to one Marcus had restored months earlier. Why do people pay so much money for them? Because they represent the highest level of craftsmanship and precision that human beings can achieve, Marcus explained. When you buy a watch like this, you're not just buying a timepiece, you're investing in art and engineering that will last for generations. Jake nodded thoughtfully, his 8-year-old mind processing concepts about value and quality that would influence his future appreciation for excellence in any field he chose to pursue. The drive home through city streets illuminated by evening lights provided time for reflection on the journey that had brought them to this point. Marcus's transformation from invisible custodial worker to recognized specialist had occurred through systematic skill development combined with courage to seize opportunities when they emerged. Most importantly, success had been achieved without sacrificing the values and relationships that had sustained them through difficult periods. Jake's well-being had remained the primary consideration in every decision, while community connections and professional integrity had guided choices that could have been compromised by ambition or financial pressure. A year later, Marcus stood before an audience of aspiring horological specialists at the first graduation ceremony for Sterling Industries' Precision Instrument Assessment Program. 24 students had completed the intensive training curriculum he had developed, gaining skills that would launch careers in collectibles evaluation and luxury asset management. The most important lesson I can share, Marcus told the graduating class, is that expertise develops through curiosity, patience and willingness to approach problems without preconceptions about what should be possible. Formal education provides valuable foundation, but practical competence comes from hands-on experience combined with systematic study. Jake, now 9 years old and increasingly sophisticated in his understanding of mechanical principles, watched from the front row with pride that had only grown stronger as his father's reputation expanded. The boys' science fair projects had evolved to incorporate precision engineering concepts, while his academic performance had earned scholarship consideration from several prestigious schools. Victoria Sterling, whose investment in Marcus's development had yielded returns far exceeding initial expectations, introduced the keynote speaker from Rolex Corporation, who would present certificates to the graduating specialists. The program had already attracted international attention as a model for developing expertise outside traditional educational pathways. Marcus Thompson's journey from custodial worker to internationally recognized specialist demonstrates that talent emerges in unexpected places when we create opportunities for people to develop and apply their capabilities. Victoria told the audience, Sterling Industries is proud to have supported this transformation while establishing educational programs that will benefit the entire industry. The ceremony concluded with announcements about employment opportunities available to program graduates, including consulting positions with major auction houses, insurance companies, and private collectors, who had learned to value practical competence over conventional credentials. As the audience dispersed and graduates celebrated with families and friends, Marcus reflected on how completely his life had been transformed by the simple act of curiosity about a discarded watch. The restoration of Victoria Sterling's father's Rolex had opened possibilities that neither of them could have imagined, creating opportunities that extended far beyond individual advancement. Jake approached with questions about the program's technical curriculum, his 9-year-old mind already working through concepts that might influence his own future educational choices. The boy's intellectual development had accelerated alongside improved resources and expanded opportunities that his father's success had provided. "Dad, do you think I could design better watches someday?" Jake asked his question, reflecting the ambitious thinking that characterized his approach to every subject that captured his interest. "I think you could design anything you set your mind to," Marcus replied with complete confidence in his son's potential. The combination of curiosity, systematic thinking and determination can overcome almost any challenge when applied consistently over time. The conversation reminded Marcus that his greatest achievement wasn't professional recognition or financial success, but creating a foundation that would support Jake's development into whatever he chose to become. The security and opportunities that consulting work provided represented investment in his son's future rather than personal accomplishment. That evening, as they reviewed homework that now included advanced mathematics and science concepts appropriate to Jake's accelerated academic placement, Marcus felt profound gratitude for the chain of circumstances that had elevated their lives so dramatically. The vintage submariner that had started everything continued keeping perfect time on Victoria's wrist, a daily reminder of the precision and reliability that governed both mechanical timepieces and human potential when properly supported and developed. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.